Hello and good afternoon or good evening or good morning, wherever you're listening to this amazing LinkedIn Live, coming to you from a very cold and miserable Melbourne, which is 8 months in a year, anyways. But my name is Naishat Gadani. If you're, plugging into this LinkedIn Live for the first time, and me and Caroline Brown, we've been hosting this LinkedIn Live shows at the start of the pandemic, and today is our 242nd episode in our journey. It's been fantastic, and we would love to bring such a rich and diverse and you know deeper discussions about work and what it means to us. Last week we talked about bingos, career resume bingos, and today we are going to talk about completely different topic, but a very interesting and very seasonal topic that has been occupying our headspace for at least for last two 2.5 years or so since the time of pandemic. I think it's had heavily occupied our headspace. And to make sense of this, we have got a co-author of the book called This Working Life, Monique Ross. She's coming to us from sunny Brisbane, which we all envy. We'll talk about that envious part a bit later. But let's welcome Caroline Brown to kick off the discussion.
Thanks, Naish, and it's absolutely fantastic to be here. And yes, I won't bitch about the cold because it's already been done. And it's really wonderful to have you here, Monique, because I was just reflecting. We started this show really when the pandemic panic hit into 2020, and there's been such a journey in terms of how people have viewed work. I think at that start it was security for a lot of people and losing jobs, and then there's been this transition phase, I think, where people have stopped to reflect after being locked down and working from home, or some people. And now we're in a stage where for some people there is a jobs boom if you're in a particular sector. So there's a real kind of shift in the market. So your book, and I was looking through it today, has such wonderful timely messages and timely exercises for people to do, peppered with real life stories and expert anecdotes. So it's really fantastic that we're getting to chat about it today. So love to get you, I guess, to start off with, to introduce yourself to the audience and tell us about the book and how you came to write it.
Yes. Oh, what a story. And I have to say that my heart skipped a beat when you said it's 2.5 years of the pandemic. I'm like, oh my God, it's not that long, is it?
Yeah.
So this story with the book, actually, for me, it kind of began at the end of 2020. So that first year of the pandemic. I had worked in the media for a long time. I was a digital journalist with the ABC. And I was quite burnt out, and especially after that first year of shifting to working from home and trying to manage a team remotely for the first time. And I just really was done with it, and thought, what am I going to do now? And really started to ask some of those big questions that a lot of people did in the pandemic about, what do I want the role of work in my life to be, and what do I want to do for work? What's actually going to make me feel alive and make me feel like I've got meaning and purpose and a bit of joy as well. So I was asking all these really big questions, and Lisa Leong, who I worked with at the ABC, she's the wonderful co-author of the book and the host of This Working Life, our favourite podcast. She actually messaged me and said, do you want to have a catch up? I've got something to talk to you about. And we'd worked together a little tiny bit at the ABC before. We'd done a couple of projects together, but we didn't know each other super well. And she said, hey, Mon, do you want to write a book with me? And I said, yes, actually, yes, I do. So it was kind of, I think, I left the ABC around that time to focus on doing the book. And I think it was something that had been brewing for a while, but it kind of all came to a point at the same time. So she's in Melbourne, so we kind of wrote this book together remotely in Google Docs. And it's just been such a fantastic thing, I think, so timely to start asking some of these big questions and exploring different ideas and ways that we can come at it.
It's interesting because there's some really practical exercises in the book as well, which I really liked. But it'd be interesting, I guess, for people to understand like your career change out of the ABC and some of the things that you really reflected on, which I'm sure you can see in the book. But yeah, how did you come to make that change for yourself?
Yeah, so around about the time I was thinking of leaving the ABC, but before Lisa had offered me this incredible opportunity, I was thinking about what I would do instead. So if I do leave the ABC, what am I going to do? And it was really, for me, it was kind of all or nothing. I'm like, I don't want to leave this job and go to something similar because I felt like the same thing was going to happen eventually. So I started looking, Dory Clark talks about optimizing for interesting, which I love that phrase. Instead of looking for your passion or something that might feel a little bit loaded, just look at what am I interested in? What things do I do when I've got free time? And for me, it was all about being outside. So every chance I got, I was going hiking or going camping and just being in the outside. So I thought, I want my career to be something outside. So I was going down all those little rabbit holes then of like, maybe I can get into like bush regeneration or work in a nursery or be a hiking guide. And I came across forest bathing or forest therapy. And I went, ooh, that's it. That's the thing. So forest therapy is effectively like a way of being in nature that's very mindful. So you slow right down and you kind of immerse yourself or you bathe in the atmosphere of nature through your senses. So a lot of the time when we're in nature, it's very A to B, like I'm going to get to the summit of the mountain. It's still very achievement based. And this is much more about just being, just letting yourself kind of be in the moment and just seeing what you notice, what comes up for you. So I did that training, and I was kind of doing this transition at the same time as we started to write the book, which was absolutely fascinating on so many different levels because we got to talk to some incredible people, and it was almost like I was getting coaching sessions. So I'm like, so if someone hypothetically is
Not too
making this
far away.
yeah, and it was just incredible. And Lisa is an incredible executive coach as well. And so I was getting all this advice coming in from many different directions just at the time that I was kind of going through it as well. And a lot of that is reflected in the book.
Yeah, just to let you know, I've got my dog in here. So he's also
Oh,
keenly,
hello.
listening. Hopefully, he doesn't want career change because we can't. It's just past that particular age. But obviously, I've heard these your podcast as well. Tell us about the during this process of writing the book. You must have as you said, you've spoken to many people. What are some of the changes and things that you started to see, like not so much mega trends that people have started, but some micro trends and what people have been thinking of,
Mm.
in terms of their career and what's been occupying their heads. But what have you observed?
Yeah, so my observations, a lot of them I think are reflected in my own experience too. I see a lot of people doing this quite deep reflection around this idea of success. You know, what is success? And I think that for a long time we had a very traditional notion of what success looked like, and it was kind of very centered on, you know, being at the top of the ladder or earning a lot of money, having a really powerful position. And now I think it's becoming much more personal, much more unique to the person. Um, so my idea of success now, obviously I've walked away from my secure, stable job. So now I'm thinking about, well, if I have, you know, creativity and lots of space and energy, that's success to me. And if I feel like I'm connected to the world and connected to other people, that's success to me. And I think I'm seeing that, you know, people really reflecting not just on what they're doing, but why they're doing it, and how they're doing it as well. I think, you know, we're already seeing this, you know, the questions being asked around the future of where we work. Is it hybrid? Is it in the office? And I think it's going to come down to just whatever suits the individual person. Um, Lisa and I had a really great conversation the other day around hyper personalization, which is something that I think is so important for workplaces, just those little ways that we can make the work experience more personalized. Because, I think for a long time we've all thought we work this way and we work this way because we've always worked this way and we can't change it. But actually, now we're seeing that we can have something that's more tailored to us. And, for a lot of people, not for everyone, but a lot of people have more power than they've ever had to kind of design and curate a work experience that's actually working for them.
What was the most, useful exercise? Because the book has got some fantastic questions and exercises to do. One of them that I found really interesting was the graph, where you mapped your life experiences and then what came up for you in that. It'd be interesting, I think, because I hadn't seen that exercise before. Just maybe explain that one to the audience and how that works around, finding.
We call this exercise a life flow exercise, tracking the flow of your life, if you will. And it's sometimes called a lifeline exercise as well. And you're basically wanting to make a little line that represents your life. So, you can start from when you're 5, 10, and just plot out the decades or the years in between. And you're really mapping out the high and low points of your life. And that's not just about work, but your entire life. So it might be relationships or different jobs, different schooling experiences or learning experiences, family, friends, travel, putting it all out there. And then, so for every one of those peaks, what we call, and every one of what we call a trough, the low points, you're wanting to pick out some learnings from it. So why was this a peak or why was it a trough? And then you're looking for themes. So when I went through mine, I wonder if I can bring it up. I happen to have a copy of the book right next to me. So this is what mine looks like.
Flash it at the start. Yes, that's it. Yep.
So it's full of highs and lows, as everybody's life is. But I really found with mine that when I looked a little bit deeper into, okay, well, why was this thing so good or why was this thing bad? I was actually really craving moments of connection with other people and moments where I felt belonging and acceptance with other people. And when I didn't have that, it didn't matter what I was doing, it was bad. And, when I was feeling a sense of freedom and freedom of expression and creative thought, and that's when I was really engaged. And so looking at that has helped me to go, oh, okay, anything that I want to do in the future, it needs to have all these elements that are present in my peaks. And I want to avoid things that have elements that are in my troughs because it just seems like they're not going to work for me anyway. That was a really powerful exercise to do. I think we don't often, we kind of get through and we're always thinking ahead. We're always looking forward. It's not often that we actually sit down and go, okay, where have I been until now? It was really powerful for me to do that and go, okay, I've actually had a great, incredible, diverse experience up until now, and I can learn a lot from that as well.
It's those clues in the past. Naish, you look like you're about to jump in and say something.
Yeah, I think in my career counseling practices, this is something that comes up very frequently. Is you know more or less people don't see themselves in three-dimensional. They see themselves just, I've studied this and I've got just this experience. They're not seeing themselves that they go to a career, think about a career with their whole life experiences. And that's a very powerful way to think about. I'm working on a doodle around that you can see yourself one side, but there are three-dimensional views, that's happening. But we rarely see that. I was talking to just a client just before on this call, and he we started to chat about it. We found out that he was one of the canoe polo. I didn't know that they played polo on a canoe, and
Okay.
he was a competitor into that. Now he works in a different industry, and he wants to change things, and he loves hiking and a lot of other things, right? But the work that he does is very, very disconnected with it. But we started to talk about it, that these are the things that you can consider, because that's where that's where the heart lies. This is the kind of things you're here. I'm not asking you to drop everything and then move into something like that, because you still have responsibility. The bank's not going to like it, right? So now you still have to find, but it just in order to if you just understand that, that could itself be liberating. And say, you know
Mm.
what, now I can think about a pivot. I can think about a change, maybe in let's say 6 to 12 months. Now I know, and I think that that's very important to think about that. Now I've got the first thing that I want to talk about is in your book you highlight a lot of strategies and a lot of things to think of. The first thing you talk about, the gift of struggle.
Mm.
uh, Tell me more, because that's kind of contradictory, gift and struggle. I always thought the gift needs to make you happy, not to make
Yeah.
you struggle with that, right? So so tell us more about that.
Yeah, so the key thing with the gift of struggle is that the struggle comes before the gift, so it's not happening at the same time. This actually came to us from a man called Bobby Herrera, who went on to This Working Life to talk about his own life and career. And he has a really interesting and beautiful story. He was one of, I think, 13 children who emigrated from Mexico to the US in, I think it was the 1960s. And they grew up very, very poor. And he talks a lot about the experiences that he had about feeling left out and not feeling, good enough, or not being able to do particular things, and the acts of generosity or kindness that kind of helped him step up and be included. And he's now the CEO of Populous Group, which is a multi-million dollar corporation. And he talks a lot about how he wouldn't be where he is today, or the person that he is today, if it wasn't for all of those struggles. And that, nothing that's of value in his life has come without a struggle. So he really sees hard times or challenges as, something that shapes us or prepares us in some way for what's going to happen next, which I think is such a powerful perspective to take in the face of things that can be really quite painful in life and really difficult. COVID is a really good example of that. This incredible collective struggle and collective trauma that we've all been going through, that I think will lead to some gifts or some new understandings for all of us. One of the things I think is really important, which we try and emphasize in the book, is that there has to be some time between the struggle and the gift. We're not saying this kind of toxic positivity about like, oh, when you're in the pit of despair, like, just look on the bright side. You're going to learn something, like one day you'll get a really good learning from this. Like, that's not really what it's about, but it's kind of having that trust that one day you will have a gift in the struggle, and that it's not for nothing. You're going to learn something from it. You're going to grow or change in some way. And I think that's been, it's a really powerful way of looking at it. I think it can give us the chance to, kind of understand our story in a different way, kind of look back on the things that have happened to us, and kind of not erase it, but rewrite it, edit it in some way so that it feels more positive. I know for myself, I give an example in the book of my own gift of struggle of my dad dying, and how profoundly that kind of really just broke my heart open, and how in that brokenness I found this new softness and new empathy for people, and kind of a new understanding that everyone's going through something. We don't know what people are going through. And I think, it did take a long time, but that gift of empathy and connection really did come from that period of struggle in my life. So that's what that one's about. I think it's, it can be applied to all sorts of different, if you've lost your job during the pandemic, that's obviously horrible and a really difficult, trying time, but perhaps it also forced you to be more creative with your career, or go on a path that you wouldn't have dared to before, or whatever it might be.
It's an interesting thing, isn't it? Because I guess, there's some people that struggle and they just continue to struggle. Like there's a kind of like, you've got to feel it. Like you've got to actually feel the pain, and then you've got to at some point, reflect on the learning that you do.
Mm.
I think that seems to me like that is the gift of the struggle, is that you feel it and it's horrible, and at some point you go, well, I feel changed, and why do I feel changed, and what I learnt.
Yeah. And there's really beautiful questions, like 4 easy questions that you can go through when you're looking at doing that. So
Mm,
you look at, how did I respond to the struggle at the time?
mm,
What did I learn from the struggle? How do I apply those learnings in my life now? And how did it shape my view of the world?
mm.
So those 4 questions are really, they're a really good way to tease out the gift from the struggle.
In your sit spot, of course.
Yes, in my sit spot. So sit spot, just quickly, is something that we do in forest therapy and also in the book. It's just a little thing where you go out into nature and you just sit and do nothing for a while, and often leads to reflection. And in the book, we have little sit spots at the end of every chapter to give, a moment of reflection.
Yeah, love it.
I think reflection is a very powerful, and I think we have, you know, we also have to be mindful that sometimes in reflection you also need right questions, because otherwise you end up reflecting on the same thing, and
Mm,
you are, kind of, um, being traumatized. Traumatized is not probably the right word, but you are just processing the same information again and again and again. So I think those gentle nudges that I'm really fond of is very important, because it takes your mind away from a, you're able to see that from different perspective. I was talking to a 20 uh, 15-year experience qualified electrician. He said, Nishad, I just hate my job now. Like, I just don't like it. And I said, they said, but what you don't like about it? And he said, I don't know. But I said, there must be some part that you like and some you don't. He said, but I've never thought about it. I said, that's your exercise, to think that there are parts of it that you are repetitive and you just don't enjoy. There's certain parts that you enjoy, and I think that's very important. That brings me to the next question: is that you talk about job crafting,
mm,
right? Which is very very important, is that you are able to kind of redesign your work, include other things. Tell us more about that idea of job crafting.
I love job crafting, and I wish I'd known about it when I was back struggling at the ABC, because it would have been so helpful for me. And I think lots of people, we feel like we're so stuck in our jobs and that our jobs are so set in stone and we have to do all these things, but there's often a little bit of flexibility there. We can, make little tweaks. And that's where job crafting comes in. So job crafting is really just taking proactive little steps to redesign your work so that it's more meaningful to you or more engaging. So it actually came out of a study that was done by 2 organizational psychologists back in early 2000s, I think 2001. And they looked at set of hospital cleaners, and they found that the cleaners who were the most satisfied and the most fulfilled with their work had found ways to kind of tweak or craft around the edges, to make it suit them better, to make it fit more with who they were. So an example from the study was, one cleaner would change the photos in each room, which wasn't part of the job description, but they felt like maybe that change of scenery would help people heal. Another cleaner, it was about the mindset and how they saw themselves as not part of a low value kind of cleaning staff, but as a really high value part of a healthcare team, creating an environment where people can heal. And so that kind of sparked this idea of job crafting. And when these psychologists looked across different fields, they found the same thing everywhere. Like, whoever was doing these little crafting was making their own meaning. So they came up with 3 types of job crafting. So there was task crafting, which is all about your daily responsibilities, what you're doing every day. Relationship crafting, which was about who you're interacting with, and then cognitive crafting, which was all about your mindset. And so there's these 3 different things that we can craft within our role. I think the cognitive crafting, the mindset one, is really powerful, because even if you have absolutely no ability to change a single thing about your job, you can change how you think about it, and kind of build some layers of meaning in that way. I think it's just so powerful to have something that, makes you feel like you're in a little bit more control, and you can go, or, you have to do what your friend needs to do and think about what it is you do and don't like about your job. So, for any kind of crafting, I think it's really important and useful to start with kind of an audit of what you do every day or every week, like looking at what actually makes up your job, because so many of us do things that we don't even really think about as part of our job, right? Or we do extra things. So looking at what you actually do. And then Dominic Price from Atlassian, he's their work futurist, he actually gave us a beautiful set of questions to ask yourself. So once you've got your little audit of what you do, you can look at your week and go, well, what did I love this week? What did I loathe? What did I learn? And what do I long for? So there's these kind of 4L questions to ask yourself. And then you can look at your 3 types of job crafting and go, oh, okay, so how do I do more of what I love and less of what I loathe? How do I keep learning more? How do I get towards what I'm longing for? And it's actually, it's not that hard. I think there are tiny little steps that we can all do every day to just edge closer to something that has a bit more meaning.
And plays quite nicely into that sort of school of strength-based work, where if you're following your strengths, you're more likely to be happier, more productive, more successful in the long run. So I love that way of, even things that you consider to be the most mundane thing, of finding a way to reposition it. It's fantastic.
Yeah, and you can even find someone else if you're looking at relationship crafting. So maybe I hate taking the minutes of a meeting, but the person who sits next to me absolutely loves it. So we can kind of swap and maybe there's something that she hates doing that I love, and we can just work it out between ourselves. Or just, different things that we might learn on the job, or different people that we could mentor or be mentored by. I think, we've got a lot more power, most of us. We're still kind of working within the framework. I think with any job crafting, we've got to be careful not to kind of overwork or do work that we're not recognized for or awarded for. We can't just keep adding different tasks in and doing more of what we love if we're not also taking something away. But yeah, there is so many opportunities there.
Absolutely. One of the things this anecdotes in the book that Lisa wrote about being, I think it was wanting to be a DJ and knocking on the door of the DJ's studio early in the morning, and taking a chance that they'd answer, and it struck me that, like, there's an act of courage in that. That what's the worst thing that can happen is probably the wrong question, but there's an act of courage in making that change or just knocking on that door. And what have you seen in terms of, because I think people don't think that they can do stuff. They don't think that they can change their career, and or about recrafting what they do. Like they doesn't occur to them that they can. So I'm just wondering about your thoughts on what gives people the courage to even make that tiny change, whether it's a job change or a change in how they think, repositioning. What do you think gives people courage?
That's such a big question. I think courage is such an important value as we're going forward in our careers that we all need to kind of draw on. And we talk in the book about micro acts of courage. You don't have to be doing some big, outrageous, like slaying the beast type thing. Like, there are tiny little micro acts of courage that we can all do every day. I think, if it's something like job crafting, I think it can be courageous to get your manager involved in it. to kind of frame it as, I love my job, but I want to love it more. And, I want you to help me do that. So can we talk about job crafting? And I think in, the current jobs market, that hopefully would be very well received, because they don't want to lose you. In terms of the bigger thing, I think you're right. I think there is that voice going, oh my God, like all these things could go wrong. Let me list out all the things that are going to go wrong. And there's a lot of considerations in the current economy as well for, those things that can go wrong when you leave a job or change a job. But I think we have to keep, this question in mind also of like, well, what if it works out? What if it all goes right? And what would my life look like if it all goes right? When I was thinking about my career change, I had a huge list of all my fears written out. And that it was a very, very long list, I have to say, like leaving a secure job in the middle of a pandemic to go and do forest therapy that no one's ever heard of before. It was a really scary, that was a big act of courage. And the thing that I kept coming back to was, what's the cost of doing nothing? Like if I do nothing, nothing will change. And is that okay for me? Is that good enough for the life that I want to have? And it wasn't. So for me, it almost felt like in the end, there was no choice. I was terrified, but there was no choice. And hopefully, I hope with the book and different strategies that we're giving, that it doesn't get that far for people. I think it shouldn't get that far. I would have really benefited from job crafting in my role. But I felt like I was too far gone, and also a bit scared to talk to my manager about it, because it was the pandemic and I didn't want to seem ungrateful for my job or kind of rustle any feathers where people were already really stressed and everyone's already dealing with a lot. But yeah, you live and you learn.
Obviously, job crafting is something may not be possible in a lot of smaller organizations, or where organizations don't have interesting work, or you just learned everything that you needed to. And at that time, I think volunteering, pursuing what you like to do, teaching, as Richard Feynman I think says, that if you want to master a craft, that you teach the craft. That's the only way to master a craft. So going and teaching, I think those are some of the ways that you can also continue to add spices to your curry and make it a little bit more interesting. Let's move on to one of the other aspect that you talk about, which is called fail like a scientist. Which I like, because I also talk a lot about design thinking in careers, and that's part of this whole thing is prototyping and testing out that thing. Tell us more about what's your thinking behind it, and if you've got any anecdotes or examples that you can share.
Sure. So this idea of failing like a scientist, it actually comes from Lisa, who did way back in the day doing a law and science degree. And, openly she will tell you that she was not a very good scientist. She was an utter failure as a scientist. She even sparked the evacuation of an entire lab. She did an experiment that was meant to be done in a fume cupboard. But that little piece of information was hidden in the instruction manual, which she hadn't read. So she got to the end of the experiment after a couple of days, and there was black smoke everywhere in the room, and the whole place had to be evacuated. So she knows about failing as a scientist. But that part of her degree actually gave her the mindset of a scientist, which is to have a hypothesis and then run experiments to test it. And when you're a scientist, you're not looking for a successful result necessarily. You're just looking for a result. So a failed result can tell you just as much, even more, a lot of the time, than a positive result can. And really importantly to this mindset, when an experiment fails and you're a scientist, the experiment fails. You don't fail. You're not a failed scientist. It's just that your experiment failed and you've got to do another one. So we've kind of taken this thinking and gone, well, what if we treated our careers and our lives like a lab, and every day is lab day? What would it mean if every day in our careers we're just scientists in a lab and we're just testing our thinking? So we might have a hypothesis and we just want to test it. It's not about getting a positive result, we just want some data. And then everything that happens, it's just more data, and all that data adds up to something that helps lead you in the right direction. So we've adopted this as kind of a thought experiment, kind of a new mantra for our lives. Every day is lab day. And I love it. I think for me, it really takes the pressure off. I think, we are conditioned and taught to avoid failure at all costs. And I'm not advocating for actively failing, but I think we avoid a lot of things because we are scared of what's going to happen. I worked in the media for 12 years and I never once went on the radio. I certainly did not do a live show because I was terrified about what would happen if I messed up and everybody heard, and so I just never did it. And then after I left the media, when we wrote the book, I started going on podcasts and talking on the radio, and it's like, actually, I love this. I love these people that I get to meet. Like, it's not perfect, it's very human, it's totally okay. And I think about all those opportunities that I missed through my career because I was so scared. So I think really this idea of every day is lab day is about just taking some of that fear away from failing and just embracing it. If it's just an experiment, if it fails, I haven't failed. I'm not a failure, but my experiment didn't go great. And I think that's really helpful.
Yeah, I love that kind of concept because I always find whenever I'm going to try something new, I procrastinate a little bit, and then I'm like, okay, I'm procrastinating, and then I do something, and then I discover that what I was scared about or fearful of didn't happen, but there was something else. So I don't know myself very well. Like it's like, what I think is going to be the outcome is never the outcome. It's always something different. But often just, the act of trying builds up your courage, and then you make a mistake and you're like, oh, okay, well, I can fix that because I've come down that road. But I think it's that kind
and
of
like
story.
we're not doctors doing heart surgery, like if I go on the radio and I mess up my words or fumble over my words, no one's going to die. Like, it's totally fine. Like, that's the worst thing that could happen, and it's not going to happen. So really, it's fine.
Yeah, absolutely.
Absolutely. Because I think that those short experiments is good rather than you coming to a juncture where you said, now I have to make the decision now, and you haven't experimented anything, and you end up, making a bigger mess, as well. So, you know, as we say in design thinking, you clear the table. You come up with many possibilities, many career options, not just one career option. And then you start to clear oh, this works. Let me go and ask somebody. Let me do an informational interview to check out whether am I really suited for that or not. And then you experiment with it. And they said, nah, this is not going to work out. We'll move on. You're not attached to it. You're attached to creating. You're attached to coming up with as many possible uh, you know, uh, possible selves, as I think Herminia Ibarra says in her book of Working Identity, that you invent as many possible selves as possible. Because you're not one, you're not one, you're many in one person, and that itself is quite liberating for many people. Tell us about this reframing idea, imposter syndrome reframing. We all suffer from one or the other in one or the other capacity. After 5 minutes, I might be completely taken over by imposter syndrome too. But tell us about reframing, and if you got, what's your strategy behind helping people reframe?
So this is such a big one, and it really does affect everyone. I think that the research says that it's 70% of people, but I'm like, the other 30% have got to be lying. Like, there's no way. Otherwise, I want their secret. But we really, in the book, we actually reframed imposter syndrome as imposter thoughts. Because we sat down and talked about it, and we thought, there's just something about that word syndrome that didn't sit quite right with us, because we do see it as just a natural part of being human, and something that we all experience. And so it's not something that we need to fix or, treat with, some kind of medicine. It's just something that we need to learn to live with, really, because it's not going anywhere. So we came up with imposter thoughts as being maybe a more helpful term, maybe something a little bit kinder to ourselves as well. And really, that's all they are, right? They're just thoughts. But they are with us, far too frequently, at least for me, for my liking. I think that it's very familiar to a lot of us, that kind of fear of being not good enough or being found out. In the book, we went through a couple of strategies for how to tame them. So if we accept that they're not going anywhere, what can we do about them? Can we kind of domesticate them a little bit even? We got some expert advice on how to do this. So the first thing was to create a brag file. And this comes from researcher Hugh Cairns, who has written a book about imposter thoughts and also has them himself. And so basically a brag file is just a file, which might be physical or like a little subfolder in your inbox, where you put all the good things that people say about you. So I keep emails when we get good feedback about the book. It all goes in the brag file. When my friends tell me something nice about me, I put it in the brag file. And then when those imposter thoughts start to, you start to have that buzz of anxiety around it, you can look at all the times that other people have said, you're amazing, like you're really good at your job, positive feedback, good stats, whatever it is. And it just kind of helps amp you up again. And sometimes that's actually enough. That's all you need, is just to go, oh yeah, okay, I think I do have this. Another one I really love is to look at fact versus fiction, or fact versus feelings. So feel your imposter thoughts. Like I had serious imposter thoughts writing the book. Like, who am I to write a book? Like, what do I have to say? I can't write a book. But actually, I've been writing words my whole career. I have a degree. So I was able to go, okay, my imposter thought is telling me that I can't write a book. I can't write 90,000 words, but my career is telling me that I can. So using that to balance it out. And then a fun one, which I really love, that comes from Kate Morris, who's the founder of Adore Beauty, is to give the thoughts a name. So she calls hers Kevin, which I just love. So when those thoughts start, she's like, rack off, Kevin. I don't have time for you today, Kevin. And this is a brilliant tactic. It's actually used in psychology. I use it for my anxiety. It's called cognitive diffusion. So it's basically just separating those thoughts, those voices from yourself as a person. So I'm not anxious. I have anxiety. And Kate Morris is not an imposter. She has Kevin stuck in her head. That's really, really useful. And I think when you can do this, when you can start to reframe it, we talked to a lot of people who found that once they had that hold on them and they weren't kind of being crippled by them, they were actually able to use those thoughts as a force for good. So it was able to be like a moment of growth or a moment of overcoming for people. It was able to push people to learn more, to go, oh, okay, I'm feeling a bit uneasy. Maybe I just freshen up that skill or go and learn something else. And it became really powerful for a lot of people.
One of my friend used to have a physical object, and she would name that as Tiger before she goes into a meeting. And we used to work with people with workplace injuries and transport injuries, so quite difficult sometimes. She would name this physical object as Tiger, and she'll say, Tiger, I'm going into a meeting, I want you to keep quiet. Once I'm back, I know you would love to talk to me. Once I'm back, we'll have a chat, we'll go out for a coffee, but until that, I want you to zip your mouth. And she said that she used to language that, not in her head, but really saying it
Mm.
to that. And the act of saying it frees her up. And that makes a lot of sense because the moment you say that, then it's got less grip on you. And she said then she would go back and come back, and she'll have a chat with him again, and there you go. But I really like that idea of languaging it because that's the only thing that we have, in our, we Hindus offer prayers, and the same uh, thing that we put as food to the god, uh, you know just out of languaging, that becomes precious. Nothing, no physical changes to that, just because of the languages. Languaging is very, very important, around that. So that's really good, strategies, Monique, that you shared. KB, you've got question. We are coming to an end. uh
I think was one thing we sort of talked about the frame and reframe. I guess I was just curious about, now that you've kind of transitioned into your new career, do you feel differently about it? Like, do you get up every day with a bit of bounce in your step? Like, some people don't know that they're stuck. Everybody else knows they're stuck, but they don't know that they're stuck. And often you feel that in
Mm.
your body. And I was curious about how that feels for you now that you've made that big change.
Yeah, interestingly for me, so I've always been a morning person,
Mm,
up at the crack of dawn. And when I left the ABC, I went through this big period where I just found it really difficult to get out of bed. And I was getting up at like 10, 11, and I became a night person. And now it's, a year and a bit later, I'm reclaiming my mornings. And I think it was my
mm,
body saying, like, you need to stop. Like, this is a profound thing that's happened and you need to do this. I think I had lost this sense of how energizing work can be, that
mm,
I'm working like arguably harder than ever, trying to build something now from the ground up. And I love it. I am
mm,
just so engaged with what I'm doing, and connected with it. And I feel a real sense of purpose.
mm.
Um, there's definitely still, I've been reflecting on this lately, that I feel like there's always got to be a part of work that I don't like. So there's definitely still, it's not all perfect. But it is that sense of feeling hopeful and excited about going to work, instead of just feeling that like stuck, like I've got to go to work, and kind of
Mm,
dreading the week and living for the holidays and all of that. I
mm,
think like, I'm really looking at it now as like, I want to make a career out of being happy,
mm,
and the work that I do needs to contribute to that, but it's not going to be the only part of it.
mm,
I'm trying to shift my focus into something a little bit more holistic.
mm,
Um, so the relationships that I have and the way that I am in the world, I want that to be part of it as well as the work that I'm doing.
mm. Love that. It's kind of being, curating your happiness as well, like putting those ingredients in, and being curious about what what sits well and what fits and that type of thing.
Yeah, and it was so important for me, I think, to sit down and go, well, like, what actually am I working for? Like, why am
Mm,
I doing this? I'm doing this job that I feel like is exhausting me. It's a good job with beautiful people, but I'm exhausted.
mm,
And why am I doing it? Like, if it's not making me happy, like, something's wrong. So just kind of actually taking the time to go, what do I want to be doing? Why? What's the role of work in my life? And sitting with those questions for long enough to feel like I really had an answer.
mm. Fantastic.
Excellent, Monique. Thank you very much for joining us and really generously sharing, not only the book but your own experiences of work. The more that we talk about it, I think the more it is becoming evident that it is far more important, to talk. And I think there is already an appetite of people wanting to talk more about it in an open way. So thank you for writing the book. I'm going to put the links to all those people to go and buy the book, and give a big thumbs up to Monique for co-authoring the book as well, and Lisa as well, that she could not be here today. But we are also wishing you that you win the Australian Career Book of the Year award, because that's a fantastic
I feel like
one
you
as
say
well.
that to everyone. You
You're the first
say
one. We
that to
haven't
all the
said. No, no,
nominees.
no. You're the first one this time,
Yours
so
is
we
the
haven't said it
best.
to everyone. Yeah, that's correct. Yeah, but it's an absolutely amazing read. So we encourage people to go and check out the book, buy that, and read the book again. But Monique, thank you again for coming on our show and sharing so generously. Thank you again.
Thank you. It's been my pleasure.
Fantastic. Absolutely delightful. Um, so yes, a few sort of wrap up things. Please follow the hashtag career care package if you haven't. I've forgotten to remind people for the last few weeks. And please subscribe to the YouTube channel if you haven't done that already. And yeah, Monique, I just absolutely echo what Naish said. Thank you so much for joining us. It's the book is such an interesting read. There's a lot of um, a lot of you guys that come through in that, but also the experts that you quote from, and you can see your curiosity and passion for the subject as well. So yeah, looking forward to seeing you number one on the list, basically.
Thank you.
All right, everyone. We will see you again on next Tuesday at 5:30 p.m. Melbourne time. We don't know who will be there as a guest, but we'll definitely find someone amazing to talk about. We also don't know what are we going to talk about. Maybe a bingo that me and I've worked on. But we'll figure it out. We'll let you know. Don't worry. But we'll be there next week Tuesday. Until then, stay safe, stay warm if you're in eastern part of the world. Monique doesn't have to worry about that. But we'll see you. Have a good one, everyone. Bye for now.
Bye everyone.